Time now to hear from our Monday panel of parliamentary journalists. All have a look, all looking mostly refreshed from the late night, early morning festivities Saturday night at the Presse Gallery dinner here in Ottawa. Susan Delacourt, a columnist and parliamentary bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Joel-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse, and John Ivison, columnist for the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Postmedia. Y'all look pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty
good. It's what's in here.
It's
great. Yeah,
it's always a late night, early morning at the Presse Gallery dinner, and we're going to show excerpts from the leaders' speeches coming up in just a few minutes here. But I just want to start off by pick up any. The speeches are the speeches. We'll let the viewers look at them and see what they think. But pick up any interesting vibes in the room or from the comments you heard on Saturday night, Susan?
a little low key. I expected it because the tenor of debate is so bad right now. I expected it to be kind of uglier. I thought there was going to be kind of nasty, but the speeches were safe. Mm-hmm. It was interesting what each leader thought they went there to diffuse. Trudeau made jokes about SNC-Lavalin, but mostly you have to make joks at your own expense.
Right,
That's the
it's
rule,
self-deprecating.
right?
You got to be.
No jokes about Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott. None. No jokes about that. Andrew Scheer took on a little bit of the attracting extremists kind of humor, although kind of people didn't know what to say when he said, when I win the election and become prime minister, I won't have to come to these again. Right. It was funnier than that.
Yeah.
But he was.
We all remember from Stephen Harper boycotted the gallery
it's
dinners.
too soon after Harper to make that joke. And Jagmeet Singh made a whole bunch of jokes about none of his caucus wanting to run for him, including walking to the stage to the tune of "All by Myself" by Eric Carmen.
Yeah, Joel-Denis, what did you say?
Well, the jokes varied from one leader to the other, but there was one common thing among the three leaders that I noticed, that everybody took time to underline the importance of the work of the media in a democracy. And I think the timing of this was interesting because we're 5 months away from the elections, and we'll see whether their good-natured words towards the media will last after the election
beyond the doors of the gallery dinner.
Exactly. So that what struck me.
That was new too. Normally leaders don't do that.
No, they don't usually do that. And also, I thought they showed some restraint, probably because the election is coming and they want to take the gloves off right now. They want to wait until the election is officially called.
And this is something Canadians don't see, right, because of the dynamic in the House of Commons, John. But I want to get you get your comments. It's always interesting to me is they are what they are in the House, and then each one comes off the stage and goes up to the other and gives them a big hug after they came off the stage.
Beautiful,
so, kind of that dynamic's interesting to me, given then what we see when they get back to work in the House of Commons and go at each other. But John, take anything away from it?
Well, my colleagues here have pretty much covered it. I think World Press Freedom Day was last week, so maybe that, and it's been a bad year for journalists, so maybe that explained why promoting the media was at front of mind. Other than that, it was pretty unmemorable. I mean, having gone to these things, as we all have for the last 15, 20 years, there have been some real highs, there have been some great, memorable, and funny moments, and there were none this year. Yeah. When you look, there was no news stories written after it, nobody really took anything away from it. So the one thing I thought the Prime Minister was a little bit prickly in conversations. He was just a little bit on edge, which I suppose is understandable given the
I thought he was going to be more prickly. He's known to be, he has that side to him. And I thought after the very bad start to this year that there were going to be, several digs against the media, but he was mostly restrained. No personal digs at any rate. Oh, Andrew Coyne and Paul Wells got a bit of a couple of digs. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Andrew Scheer. Andrew Scheer starts tomorrow. They kicks off the Meet Andrew Scheer tour, hoping to get people to know more about not just him but policies. He starts in Montreal tomorrow. It's going to be 5 cities across Canada over the next 6 weeks. Key policy issues, foreign policy tomorrow in Montreal, and then he'll be talking about the economy, immigration, federal-provincial relations, the environment. What do you think of this strategy? What is Andrew Scheer trying to do here?
It's a very traditional opposition leader strategy. I recall Justin Trudeau did it too. He doesn't have a climate plan yet. I'm not sure that's going to be part of the...
I think we're expecting it to be part of the
last speech.
We were getting word last week that it might not have anything really precise, and it might be sort of the broad strokes. I think tomorrow is foreign policy.
Yep.
And it's good for opposition leaders to do this. Is this going to be an election fought on policy? I don't know, but he's been trying to get people to know him since he was doing those ads with the little red bench and walking through neighborhoods. Right. So
John, does it have to be more? I mean, if it's, we're expecting to hear Andrew Scheer in foreign policy, does it have to be more than I wouldn't have messed up the trade file, I wouldn't have messed up the China file?
I mean, he was chosen as the continuity candidate. When the Conservative Party chose a new leader, they had a choice between Max Bernier, he was going to change everything, right, and Scheer, who ended up being the standard bearer for those who thought, well, we've just lost an election, but we did pretty well. We're still raising money. We've got 100 MPs.
We still have good policies. Maybe a wrong approach, and maybe it was time for the leader to go. But
so he was going to fine tune a little bit of the Harper with a smiley face type thing, but he hadn't really grasped the Conservative Party and made it his own since then. I mean, pretty much all the policies are holdovers from the Harper era. And I mean, I don't expect to see, tangents in any of the policies that he comes up with, but there has to be something distinct. I mean, there was a Bloomberg poll today which showed that he's neck and neck with Justin Trudeau at the moment on economic competence, who's more like. Now, Harper always was well ahead of Trudeau on that measure. He just has not defined himself yet, and I think that these speeches, if they help him do that, it doesn't need to be precise policy laying out the platform. It just needs to be a little bit, this is my party, this is what I believe in.
Right.
This is an opportunity for Mr. Scheer, I think, to put, like John said, his stamp over the party. This is what my party will look like if it forms government on October 21st after the election is over. But the most critical test, I think, will be on the environment and climate change, because this is where the Prime Minister wants to go in this election. And if Mr. Scheer cannot fight the perception that the Tories would be, a carte blanche for the petroleum industry and just free to pollute, as Catherine McKenna keeps saying about the Tory policies, this is going to be a big test. And for them, it's a key one in Quebec, where they want to
Well,
make
it strikes me as I was just going to say, it strikes me as interesting,
and
the choice of topics here. He's going to Quebec to talk about foreign policy. When he could have
climate change.
Yeah, and both.
I think what would be really interesting is if they came out with a plan, which, however they get there, the targets were beyond what the Liberals are promising. Because if they were to do that, it would almost do what the Liberals did to the Conservatives in the last election, when the Liberals fought the Conservatives on home ice on taxes. They essentially, in the form of the Canada Child Benefit, undercut what the Conservatives were promising on taxes, because the Conservatives were constrained by having to balance the budget, and the Liberals threw out that orthodoxy. Right. If the Conservative Party were somehow to come up with a climate change plan where the emissions cuts were going to be greater. Now, that's a big if, because I don't know how they get there, but it would be a very smart political move, I think.
Yeah, another thing, to link to the dinner again, too, there were many, many jokes made about Jason Kenney sitting in the front row at the Press Gallery dinner, and a few of, the official leader of the Conservatives. So all of us, I think, are going to be watching all these speeches and saying, how does that compare to Doug Ford's Ontario? How does that compare to Jason Kenney's Alberta? Because it's great that he has all these allies to fight an election campaign too, but are they all going to be singing with one voice on policy? And that's
why I was saying that the climate change and environment policy will be the most critical one, because, as she alluded to, will it come at a price of losing support with provinces that are led by Conservative
You can't
premiers?
afford to have those Conservative premiers offside on a policy that's being so hard fought here. Okay, let's talk about the by-election in Nanaimo-Ladysmith. What are you watching for?
The Green Party.
Greens again.
Will the wins that they've got in their sales, that they got in PI in the provincial elections, that they are forming the official opposition in the provincial legislature for the first time now, will they get that kind of win out to the Pacific and win that one? If that's the case, that could spell problems for the NDP, because they would lose that seat, but also for the Liberals. That means that the Green Party might be taking away some of the left-wing or progressive votes that the Liberals need to keep power, and that would be a pretty powerful signal.
What do you think, John?
There was an Abacus data poll recently which suggested that 40% of voters are now open to voting Green, which was the highest they've ever recorded. That just
it's kind of interesting to watch where we've come from. The split on the right in Canada, and now are we talking about a potential for a three-way split on the progressive side? Now, to be clear, the Greens are always careful about this, right? The Greens like to say, look, we're not way on the left side of the fiscal policy. We're not that at all. But they're a lot closer on social policy and other things to I think to Liberals and New Democrats, and that's a big challenge, right, for those parties.
This would be history making too. Elizabeth May, for a brief shining moment for herself, did have 2 MPs. If you ask me right now what his name was,
Bruce Hire.
Bruce Hire crossed over to her party, so there was a defection to her ranks. But she has never had another fellow MP with her back in that row, elected in that row. So
it's also the interesting dynamic as well of a by-election, right?
Right.
Like people could be saying, you could send a signal, I want to put a Green person in there to say, I'm thinking about it.
But we know this is not just a protest vote. We know that there's something going on here with the Greens. We can see it in the donations.
In every province.
Yeah.
I think the NDP raised 1.2 million in the first quarter. The Greens raised 800,000. I mean, they're not that far back in fundraising, and that makes a big difference, particularly if you're only targeting 4 or 5 ridings where you realistically think you can win.
Right.
I mean, it's more than that, but...
Let's finish on this. The Andrew Leslie story. He's been put on the witness list for the defense in the Mark Norman case. What do you make of that?
he served notice, I think, about a year ago that he was going to do that. I think the idea that it's linked somehow to his departure from the government, I think it's coincidental. I think he was always going to be a character witness, and he was friends with Mark Norman, or big admirer of his. So I think it's for Mark Norman and not against the federal government. It's the distinction in this case is important.
Yeah.
Although with the opposition parties have been making hay out of this, I don't think they have ground to stand on this one, because as Susan said, he will testify for Mr. Norman, not against the
that's
government.
the limit.
And that's a
I'm
big
here to
nuance,
testify that Mark Norman's an honourable guy.
Exactly.
I don't think he knows the details of
Right.
what happened.
No, I agree entirely with that. I think that he's upset that he wasn't in cabinet.
And that's the reason he's leaving.
He probably would have been in cabinet if Catherine McKenna hadn't won. He would have been the Ottawa minister, but she did, and he wasn't. And I think that's always rankled with him. And he's getting out while the going's good.
All right. Thank you all. 364 days till the next gallery dinner. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.